The union is not just a word. The union is a symbol. And we, the youth, should learn a lesson from this situation to unite, to make integration a reality.
It didn't begin with applause or protocol. The Grand Hall buzzed with expectation as leaders settled in, cameras ready, the agenda set. But today, the script would be torn apart. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, young and in fatigues, walked to the podium, not to play a part, but to speak a raw truth. He carried the frustrations and impatience of a generation tired of waiting. His eyes burned with the fire smoldering across the Sahel. He looked out at Africa's leadership and spoke the unspoken, channeling the anger of millions. He said what no one in that room dared to say aloud. Confusion rippled through the delegates. The usual summit rhythm shattered. Leaders shifted, some indignant, others quietly agreeing. Traoré's words exposed the cracks beneath the surface. For some, it was an insult. For others, a long-awaited reckoning. The room mirrored the continent, divided between defenders of the status quo and those demanding real change. Traoré forced everyone to choose a side. The comfortable neutrality of diplomacy was gone, replaced by confrontation with the truth. Before his speech finished echoing, the digital world ignited. Before his speech finished echoing, the digital world ignited. Before his speech finished echoing, the digital world ignited. A shaky phone video spread across Africa, raw, imperfect, but powerful. Headlines exploded. Traoré calls AU useless. The speech went viral, not for its polish, but for its honesty. Millions of young Africans saw themselves in him, demanding accountability, not permission. He echoed the spirit of past revolutionaries, saying what many had only dared to post online. This was more than a viral moment. It was the start of a suppressed continental debate. Traoré's words were the spark. The continent was ready to burn. Traoré stood alone in camouflage, his voice cutting through the chamber. He skipped pleasantries, delivering an indictment with a soldier's clarity. He spoke of blood spilled in the Sahel, of fighting alone while the AU watched. He questioned the union's relevance and purpose, daring to call it useless. The silence was profound. He had voiced a deep disillusionment. Traoré challenged the AU's foundation, exposing its disconnect from the people. His words accused the institution of betraying its founding promises. This was no slip. It was a calculated strike at the establishment. Useless was chosen to provoke, to shatter diplomatic complacency. Traoré positioned himself as a disruptor, signaling a new, impatient generation. He spoke over the heads of leaders, straight to the people. The insult forced leaders to confront their own complicity and the union's failures. Anger in the room revealed the sting of exposure. Traoré's insult unraveled the summit's entire performance. The summit's choreography collapsed as Traoré spoke. The summit's choreography collapsed as Traoré spoke. The summit's choreography collapsed as Traoré spoke. Protocol officers were helpless. The rulebook was useless. Every leader's reaction was scrutinized. Every gesture was political. The unwritten rule of unity was shattered. Africa's dirty laundry aired for all to see. Traoré's rebellion was more damaging than any outside critique. The summit's agenda felt trivial in the aftermath. He hijacked the narrative, overshadowing all planned discussions. Protocol was broken. It was replaced by an urgent, unavoidable conversation. The speech escaped the conference hall as contraband truth smuggled out on shaky phone screens. It multiplied across the digital landscape. Fast-cut collage, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, a wildfire needing no fuel. It jumped from WhatsApp groups. Its spread was organic, chaotic, and personal. They saw a symbol of their own impatience. It was defiance amplified by technology, creating a digital public square. It was a cultural moment, remixed into powerful short videos. The digital world bypassed traditional gatekeepers, delivering the message directly to the people. Power now erupts from the bottom up, driven by a digitally savvy youth. They are active participants, shaping the narrative in real time. It went viral because a generation was waiting to hear it, armed with the tools to ensure everyone else did too. The speech resonated so deeply, it articulated a feeling simmering beneath the surface for decades, a profound sense of abandonment. For countless Africans, especially the youth, grand pronouncements of unity felt like a cruel joke when stacked against daily realities. They faced unemployment insecurity, a future clouded by uncertainty. Leaders met in luxurious halls, delivering speeches disconnected from those lives. Traoré's words, sharp and unapologetic, pierced that disconnect. Not the abstract language of diplomacy, but the language of the street, the language of frustration. He became an avatar for the voiceless. He gave voice to the market woman struggling to feed her family, the university graduate with no job prospects, the citizen living in constant fear of violence. These people saw the AU as distant and irrelevant. When Traoré questioned the AU's utility, he validated their lived experience. He told them they were not wrong to feel let down, their disillusionment was justified. A political speech became a personal rallying cry for millions. This connection was strongest with the continent's youth. A generation raised on 21st century promises, yet inheriting 20th century problems. They are connected, educated, deeply aware, making the gap between potential and reality painfully obvious. They saw in Traoré a reflection of their impatience. Not of the old guard, but a disruptor, a peer, creating solidarity. His military uniform, usually a symbol of oppression, was reinterpreted, seen as a soldier's uniform on the front lines. Not a polished politician in a tailored suit, but a man of action, living the urgency. That image and his raw words forged a new symbol of leadership, ready to speak uncomfortable truths directly to power. In a world of managed personas, Traoré's speech had one invaluable quality: authenticity. It felt real. This raw honesty is rare in modern politics. It's why the speech had such a massive impact. People are desperate for leaders who speak from the heart. He refused to play the game. His authenticity acted as a magnet. This craving for authenticity has a particular resonance in Africa. Traoré's speech was a powerful rejection of that dynamic. It was seen as a courageous act of putting the continent's interests first. The speech went viral because it felt like a moment of genuine human expression. Such moments of authentic expression are incredibly rare and possess an almost gravitational pull. To understand Traoré's words, one must look back at the history that haunts the halls of the African Union. The dream of a united Africa is not new. It is a vision born from the shared struggle against colonial domination. In the heady days of independence, leaders like Kwame Nkrumah championed a United States of Africa, a continent bound by a common destiny, a shared political and economic power. However, the ghost of this original promise looms large over the modern African Union. The dream of a powerful, unified continent has remained just that, a dream. They did not experience the euphoria of independence. They have only known the long, slow disappointment that followed. They see a monument to unfulfilled potential. It was an expression of mourning for a dream that feels like it has been deferred for far too long. In 2002, the Organization of African Unity was officially disbanded and reborn as the African Union. This was meant to be more than just a name change. It was marketed as a reinvention, a significant evolution, designed to overcome the well-documented weaknesses of the OAU. The old organization had been hampered by a strict principle of non-interference. That rule, meant to protect national sovereignty, was often used as a shield by dictators and despots. It forced the OAU to stand by silently in the face of gay coups, civil wars, horrific human rights abuses. The new African Union was supposed to be different. The AU was given a broader, more ambitious mandate. It adopted the right to intervene in grave circumstances, war crimes, genocide. It aimed to build institutions modeled on the European Union, a Pan-African Parliament, a court of justice, and eventually a single currency and a central bank. The rebranding promised a more proactive, integrated, effective continental body, a pledge to move from talking about unity to actively building it. On paper, a bold step forward. Yet for many Africans, the transformation felt largely cosmetic. They ask, has the change from OAU to AU been a change of heart? Has it shifted focus from protecting leaders to protecting citizens? The old critiques persisted. Slow responses to crises, financial dependency on foreign donors, and a reputation as a dictator's club. New institutions looked impressive on paper but often lacked political will and the resources to be effective. The Pan-African Parliament has little legislative power. The dream of economic integration remains distant. This was the frustration Traoré tapped into. His speech said a name change was not enough. The underlying political culture, stability of regimes over well-being, stayed intact. The AU, like the OAU, is seen as a place where leaders protect each other, where difficult truths are avoided in the name of consensus, and where accountability is often absent. The promise of a people-centered union has not materialized. Instead, it can feel like the same machine with a new coat of paint, still failing to deliver a better life for the continent's people. While diplomats debated, the people of Africa delivered their own verdict. For them, the AU's legacy is measured in their daily lives, persistent insecurity, and barriers to trade. It is measured in youth unemployment. The people's verdict is one of profound disappointment. These realities shape public perception. The AU has had successes, but these are overshadowed by failures and silence on critical issues. Traoré amplified existing discontent. The AU has lost the trust of the people it was created to serve. Beyond protocol, Ibrahim Traoré delivered a radical vision for Africa's future. His speech was a manifesto for a new independence. Traoré's vision demands true sovereignty, an Africa that solves its own problems without seeking approval from Paris, Washington, or Brussels. It calls for an end to looking outward for validation. Sovereignty is not given, it is taken with political will and economic independence. A continent that leverages its resources for its own people, not foreign corporations. An attack on one African nation is an attack on all. It is a rejection of foreign military interventions. This declaration challenges the existing world order, a vision where Africa's youth can build a better life at home. At the heart of Traoré's vision lies a powerful truth. There can be no true political independence without economic independence. He understands that a continent unable to feed itself, power its industries, or control its currency will always be at the mercy of others. His call for economic integration is a fundamental pillar of liberation. It's a call to end the economic absurdity that has kept Africa rich in resources but poor in practice, breaking the cycle of extracting raw materials only to import finished goods at a much higher price. Traoré's vision calls for building the infrastructure that connects African capitals to each other, creating a genuine single market. Furthermore, Traoré and other leaders question colonial-era currency arrangements like the CFA franc. Ultimately, Traoré's economic vision is about dignity and self-reliance. When Ibrahim Traoré speaks, it's impossible not to hear echoes of another young captain, Thomas Sankara. Sankara, assassinated in 1987, looms large over Traoré's every move. The parallels are striking, a deliberate invocation of a revolutionary past. Traoré's emphasis on self-reliance and defiance of colonial powers continues Sankara's political philosophy. This connection is a source of immense symbolic power, especially among West African youth. The Ghost of Ouagadougou is both an inspiration and a warning. The echoes in Traoré's speech extend beyond Burkina Faso, to the wider region, reaching back to the very dawn of African independence and the grand vision of Kwame Nkrumah. Nkrumah was the original prophet of Pan-African unity, the man who said Ghana's independence would be meaningless unless linked to the total liberation of Africa. His dream was not of a loose collection of states, but of a powerful political federation and a strong economic federation, a United States of Africa capable of defending its interests. When Traoré speaks of strategic unity and collective security, he is breathing new life into the foundational Nkrumahist dream. Nkrumah, like Traoré, was deeply critical of institutions that paid lip service to unity, warning leaders in the 1960s they would be picked off one by neo-colonial forces, their economies controlled from afar, sovereignty rendered a sham. He argued that gradual economic cooperation was not enough. Only a continental government could truly secure Africa's freedom. Traoré's impatience with the AU's slow pace and his demand for functional, decisive action is a modern reflection of Nkrumah's urgent plea for radical integration. The vision of economic liberation Traoré articulates is a direct descendant of Nkrumah's thinking. Nkrumah championed industrialization and the need for Africa to stop being a mere supplier of raw materials to the West. He sought to build an economic base to support genuine political independence. Traoré's call to end colonial-era currency systems and to build intra-African trade infrastructure is the 21st century application of Nkrumah's theories on neo-colonialism. The political kingdom Nkrumah urged Africans to seek cannot be secured without first conquering the economic kingdom. By channeling the spirit of both Sankara and Nkrumah, Traoré taps into the two most powerful currents of Pan-African revolutionary thought. He combines Sankara's grassroots anti-imperialist pragmatism with Nkrumah's grand continental vision. He is reminding the world, and Africa itself, of its radical intellectual heritage. He argues the solutions need not be imported. They exist in the ideas of past heroes. His speech signaled that the dormant dreams of these titans are not dead, but are being reawakened with a new, fiery urgency. At the very core of the African Union's paralysis lies a crippling and deeply ironic contradiction. The continent's foremost institution for sovereignty is overwhelmingly dependent on foreign money. This is the AU's most profound weakness, the Achilles heel that undermines its every declaration of independence. Traoré's accusation of uselessness was not just about a lack of political will, it was a direct shot at a system where the agenda can be shaped by those who pay the bills. A significant portion of the AU's budget, especially peace and security operations, is funded not by member states, but by external partners, the European Union, the United States, and China. This is the unspoken truth that haunts every summit. This dependency creates the chains of charity, a golden leash that allows function but restricts freedom. When the AU considers deploying a peacekeeping force or launching a major development initiative, it must first consider the priorities and sensitivities of international donors. That leads to cautious, compromised action. How can the AU take a radical stance against a neo-colonial power when that same power funds its next program? Reliance on external funding forces the AU into perpetual balancing, where African people's interests can get lost. The problem is not just the money, but the culture of dependency. It discourages building sustainable internal funding mechanisms. There have been proposals to fund the Union through levies on imports and levies on flights, creating predictable independent revenue. Yet these proposals stall for lack of political commitment. It is often easier to accept a foreign check than to make hard domestic financial choices. That perpetuates a cycle. The AU as supplicant, not sovereign. This financial weakness underpins many of the AU's failures. Responses to crises are delayed and under-resourced. Grand ambitions for infrastructure and integration remain largely on paper. An organization that cannot fund itself cannot truly lead itself. It will always be beholden to others' agendas. Traoré's speech exposed this fundamental weakness. He challenged leaders to break the chains of charity and pay the price for their own liberation, because sovereignty subsidized by others is not sovereignty. The AU is often compared to a lion, a powerful symbol. Yet in practice, it is too often a lion without claws, without teeth, capable of a mighty roar, but unable to effectively hunt or defend its territory. The organization has no standing army of its own. Military impotence is visible in regions like the Sahel. The AU's inability to project decisive military force cedes the security of the continent to external actors. The weakness is not just military, it is economic. It is still incredibly difficult for African countries to trade with one another. This combination of military and economic weakness leaves the AU exposed. It was the roar of a young lion demanding that the continent finally grow the claws it needs. The reaction from Africa's establishment was a mix of quiet shock and outright indignation. But the response from the streets was the complete opposite. An immediate, thunderous roar of approval, an explosion of support that reverberated across the continent's digital airwaves. It was the youth who rose first and loudest in Traoré's defense. For them, this was not a breach of protocol. It was profound clarity and validation. They saw a leader not speaking down from a pedestal, but speaking for them, directly at an establishment they felt had ignored their cries for change, for jobs, for a dignified future. This was their moment. For years, they'd used social media as their primary political tool, creating hashtags, sharing memes, building online communities to protest injustice and demand accountability. They organized movements like EndSARS in Nigeria and mobilized against constitutional changes across the continent. In Traoré's speech, they saw their digital activism hit the world stage, halls of power echoing the digital square, their dissent becoming headline news. The praise wasn't just for what he said, but how he said it. He spoke with raw courage they admired. They were tired of scripted, ambiguous politicians. Traoré's bluntness felt authentic. He did not ask for change. He demanded it. He did not plead for respect. He commanded it. That unapologetic strength resonated with a generation that is bold, outspoken, and unwilling to wait. From Dakar to Dar es Salaam, young people embraced him as one of their own. They saw his youth as an asset. Untainted by decades of compromises, he represented a clean break, a new beginning, a chance to build an Africa that works for its young people. Defending him online and in their communities, they were not just defending a foreign leader, they were defending their hope for different leadership and a different future for their continent. The overwhelming sentiment expressed by the African people, especially the youth, could be summed up in a single powerful idea. He said what we were all thinking. There was a palpable sense of relief. Traoré simply had the courage to say it on the biggest stage. This courage is what they praised above all else. To stand up in a room full of powerful heads of state and challenge the very institution they lead is not a small act. Traoré's speech was seen as a necessary and courageous break from tradition. In praising Traoré, the people were also sending a clear message to their own leaders. We are tired of the silence. We want leaders who are fearless, honest, and who are willing to fight for our interests. The popular response was a collective demand for a new standard of leadership across the continent. Ibrahim Traoré's speech posed a fundamental question for the African continent. Can a single voice ignite a continental movement for profound change? The speech was a spark. The question is whether this spark will grow into a continent-wide conflagration of revolutionary change. A movement requires more than a figurehead. It requires leaders to have the courage to join the call for reform. The response to Traoré's speech shows that the forest is indeed dry. He could be the catalyst, giving a fragmented population a shared language of defiance. One voice can awaken a continent, but it takes millions to transform it. As Traoré's speech echoed globally, starkly different narratives emerged. Western media painted him as a dangerous radical, downplaying his AU critique and focusing on anti-Western sentiments. Conversely, African and Pan-African media celebrated him as a truth-teller and a hero. They linked him to historical figures like Sankara, framing his speech as a call for unity and independence. This clash of narratives reflects a global power struggle. The divergent reactions from global media underscore a critical reality. Truth is often a geopolitical battleground. For Western powers, a leader calling for self-sufficiency is a direct threat. Portraying him as a dangerous radical is a tool of containment. Framing defiance as manipulation denies genuine support from the African people. It's a neo-colonial tactic, infantilizing leaders who step out of line. Conversely, Pan-African media's embrace of Traoré is a geopolitical act, resisting decades of outside narratives. They assert the continent's right to define its own heroes and vision for the future. This is decolonization of the mind and media. The battle for Africa's future is on the battlefield of information. Traoré's words were a shift in the global balance of power. The story of Ibrahim Traoré's speech concludes in the hearts and minds of over 1 billion people. It stands as a testament to a profound principle. The simple, unvarnished truth becomes the most potent and revolutionary weapon. Traoré's words shattered the silence. It was an act of liberation. His power came from articulating a reality that everyone knew, but no one dared to speak aloud. This is the ultimate lesson from the speech that shook a continent. A transformative power can be found in honesty. The most hopeful weapon in the fight for a better future is, and always will be, the truth. The speech leaves Africa at a crossroads, a choice that will define its future. Visual emphasis. No spoken change. Continue. The aftermath. The easy path is to treat Traoré's words as an anomaly, returning to business as usual, hoping the people's anger will fade. The other path, though difficult, is the only one that leads to the future Traoré envisions. It demands bold steps toward financial independence, security, and tearing down economic barriers. This choice confronts every citizen. Will the speech ignite sustained movements for change? Only the collective steps of a people can make the journey. The future depends on it. The choice is between the familiar past and a liberated future. The world watches to see which path Africa will choose. They said he broke protocol, but sometimes the only way to wake a continent is to speak the truth. It signals a pivotal moment where a new generation is finding its voice, unwilling to accept the excuses of the past. It represents a fundamental shift, a rejection of the quiet diplomacy that has too often served external powers and internal elites, rather than the African people themselves. The silence that once defined the corridors of power has been irrevocably broken, and a new, more demanding conversation has begun. The old rules of the game have been changed forever, but the fire has been lit. But one thing is certain: Africa will never be the same. This is Insight Africa, where Africa's silence ends.